Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Justin Berry. I'm a full-time police officer. I've been a police officer for 13 years, and I'm a candidate for the Texas House District 47 race that's currently in a runoff right now. And voting for that race is July 14th.
Really appreciate you coming on for this conversation and talking with us today.
Well, thank you all for having me and allowing me to be on y'all's platform to talk about recent events and issues and working on going forward from here.
So, first of all, I just want to say thank you for joining us. I understand you've been working quite a bit. I appreciate you making the time in your schedule to sit down and have this discussion, and hope that we can start to shine a light on your perspective as a Austin police officer and a Texas House candidate. I'd like to start off, I guess, by asking you, like, what was your reaction to the tragedy that occurred with George Floyd?
Yeah, that was heartbreaking to watch. I've been a police officer for 13 years, and this is the first time that we've had one of these incidents in this country where I think every single police officer I know came out and just condemned what they saw. I mean, everyone from police chiefs to police unions, police associations, individual officers. It was something that I've never seen that response from the law enforcement community before. And then to come to find out later on that that's actually part of their training policy. That was we were all shocked by that. I know I've been having conversations with a lot of individual officers lately about maybe there need to be some changes made with regards to maybe some national standards of use of force, or some, at least some statewide standards of use of force. Because I was shocked to see that that's part of their training curriculum up there.
What are your thoughts on a policeless future?
I think a policeless society is one you can look at countries around the world that have that. You can look at in places like Uganda and Congo and elsewhere where you don't have a solidified policing force there, and it's disturbing. There's going to be other groups that fill that void of power, and I'll tell you right now, it's very alarming. That there's such a demand for this depolicing agenda taking place. And we're starting to see some of people making a move right now in the depolicing agenda. And it's horrific. I don't want to live in that. Look on the streets right now. This lawlessness taking place, chaos taking place. That's what day-to-day life would look like without a trusted law enforcement organization out there to protect our communities and to protect our businesses and our day-to-day living. And our values as we want to live within a community. That's law enforcement's job, is to enforce the laws enacted by legislators, policymakers, and our elected officials. So if there's an issue there on the law enforcement side of things, you have to look at what they've been asked by your legislators to enforce. And if you have any issues with that, then you need to look towards your elected officials.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on it a minute ago, just with what we talked about earlier with George Floyd, but with the incident with, I understand it's, ongoing with Mike Ramos, but what goes through your mind, like, as a police officer, when you hear that someone was killed while officers are responding to a call?
Yeah, it's always heartbreaking anytime you're dealing with the loss of life. For me personally, I always reflect upon the fact that we all have loved ones that expect us to come home to them. That's what I focus on every day. That's the promise I make to my wife and my family, is that I'll come home to them at the end of my shift every day. And I'm sure everyone else in the world feels the same way. That's us being humans. Everyone wants to go home to the people that they loved, and their loved ones expect them to come home to them. So when that doesn't happen, it's tragic. But one thing I always want to tell people is context is very important. We seem to have gotten away from that in our generation of being patient, of wanting to know what are the facts, and allowing time for those facts to be revealed. We live currently in a generation of instant gratification. We want all the likes, all the emotions on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. That's just kind of the culture we're growing up in right now, is instant gratification. If I want something, I'm getting it right now. And I think that's one of the blessings we have in the United States of America, is we get to have that sort of instant gratification privilege. But I don't think it's something that is always a good thing. Putting things in context, especially when it comes to use of force with the police officer in the community, is it's important to understand the context, because the context gives a lot of insight and preliminary insight to what took place and what occurred, and allows for people to make not emotional, but to make informed and logical decisions rather than uninformed emotional reactions. And I think that's something that's really important when you look at critical incidents, and especially when it comes to use of force, is looking at the whole picture rather than just a few split seconds of a video, but understanding what led up to it, what took place, and what happened. And that's what comes through for an investigation. And that's part of the problem that we see a breakdown in right now, is people are wanting answers right now, and that's completely understandable. This is what took place. It demands answers. It demands it. But we must do our part as the community to give the time that it takes to get those answers, so we can ensure justice can be pursued, because justice cannot be pursued without time and patience.
With all the protests that have occurred recently, as the result of the community wanting to be heard, what do you think is the best way that citizens can peacefully create change within our judicial system and law enforcement?
I think peaceful protesting has always been the shining standard. We've seen it throughout our history as Americans. It's always been the pathway to affecting respected change and change that is welcomed by all. It's always been through the peaceful protest. Martin Luther King Jr. was a shining example, and he's always the go-to for how to affect change and how to affect change peacefully. And that's one thing that I would always encourage people to do, that is keep it peaceful. But how do we keep these protests peaceful? Especially in moments like this, when you have such an emotional charged incident, that people are right to feel the way they feel, and they're right to be angry, and they're right to want to be heard, and they're right to demand answers. The problem comes in is with these agitators and these anarchists that start infiltrating what is supposed to be a peaceful protest to honor and provoke and to provide a pathway for positive, impactful change. And yet these antagonists and these anarchists come in there, and they prey upon, right now they're preying upon the African-American community that's grieving and in mourning and wanting change and wanting to be heard. You have these anarchists that are coming into this community and causing chaos. They are destroying anything that could positively be made with Mr. Floyd's horrific death, and they're just diluting it, all for their own agenda, which is anarchy and chaos. They're making it about them and their agenda, rather than focusing on what we should be focusing on, is getting an investigation going, allowing the time for that investigation to take place, allowing time to be informed, and to set ourselves up for success to achieve justice for Mr. Floyd. Instead, it's becoming about destruction and chaos and looting and rioting and violence and harm and the deterioration of respect in the community. And that's something that we cannot stand for. And if you're out here in one of these peaceful protests, is something you must do is hold those people that are throwing rocks, that are throwing bottles, that are chanting killing of people, killing cops, killing people of race. It is your responsibility to hold them accountable. Do not let them take away from the message of why you're there, because they are doing that. They are destroying the message that you are there for peacefully by promoting this anarchist mentality and chaos.
Well, for most in Austin, we truly don't know how racist the APD workplace can be. So in your experience, Justin, how openly racist are cops in the APD workplace?
I'm going to be very frank with this.
We've heard stories. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I'm going to be very frank with everybody. I am not aware of anybody that's ever been openly racist with their comments and with things of that nature. Is it there? Is it possible? Yes. And have I personally witnessed it? No. So I'm not going to testify or talk on things that I personally have not witnessed or experienced myself. I think that would be unjust, and that's just going to fill a bunch of misinformation out there. Now, people may have had their own experiences, and I invite them to come to talk about their experiences. But as far as me, I have not witnessed that. What I have seen, though, is members of the police department try to go above and beyond to try and build bridges. And not just build bridges, but get people to use those bridges to walk along and to work together between our communities. And that's the challenge, is using the bridges. We can put forth all the effort, all the hard work to build a bridge, But if we keep standing on our sides and we never want to cross that bridge, then we're not achieving anything. And I think it's very important that we start walking across these bridges that both sides have been working years tirelessly on building, especially since Ferguson. I think you've seen so much from our local law enforcement leaders to really try to build those bridges, hold officers accountable when we make mistakes, and ensure that we have policies in place and training in place that keep us accountable, that keep us professionals, and that ensure that we earn the trust of the community.
Let's see. So what's something that you wish that people knew about your job as a police officer that you don't feel like people know about it?
I think a lot of people, there's a few things. But the thing right now that I think is the most meaningful is I don't think people view me or any other officer, as soon as we put that uniform on, we are viewed as a symbol of authority. The human side of us behind the badge kind of gets faded away. And I understand that. And I understand we're taught about officer presence, and we conduct ourselves and present ourselves in a manner of authority. And so I understand why people don't always view me as just Justin Berry. They view me as Officer Berry, a person of authority. So part of that is bold. Part of that is to make sure we have order. But it's important people that I have it. There's hobbies I enjoy doing. There's movies I like. Music I like to do. I like to go out two-stepping with my friends. That was my biggest stress relief for the longest time. Then I'm human as well. I have emotions as well. I make mistakes like everyone else. But I also learn from my mistakes like everyone else. Well, hopefully everyone else learns from their mistakes. I think that's the thing that people need to remember is we're human beings as well. And we're not emotionless people that aren't impacted by the things we hear and aren't impacted by the things we see. And that stuff sits with us. We have conversations amongst ourselves, just like you do when you go to work or when you talk to your friends. We're from the community. And that's where law enforcement should be. It should be from the community. That's why I've not ever been a fan of a nationalized police force, because you take away the culture of a community that gets ingrained into the policing profession. The policing profession is from the community. It deals with what the norms or what that community wants, demands of its police force, and allow it to be ingrained in that police culture. And that's why it's always unfair when an incident takes place in one part of the country and then every officer is deemed as though it's the same. That's the danger of a nationalized police force. And unfortunately, rightfully or wrongfully, every police department across the country right now is under siege, all for what happened in one community. Those are not the values that we have here in Austin. They're not the values in Houston or Dallas or San Antonio or elsewhere. And so it's one of those things that it's important to remember, focus on the issues that are taking place within your community. Keep your community's police department accountable, and understand that each state has its own laws. It has its own rules, its own set of norms. And to hold one police department accountable for what happened somewhere else, I think it's very unfair. It's okay to say, listen, learn the lessons of that community, learn the failures of there, so it doesn't happen here. That I agree with wholeheartedly. That is something that should take place, because we should be learning from the mistakes of our peers. But to apply the same blame for issues at the local level, I think is unjust.
First item that you would see want to change in the APD and Austin area as an entire whole?
So you're saying, if elected, what would I want to see being changed within APD and the community as a whole? Is that what was asked?
Correct.
Okay. I see my friend Sheena's on here. Hey, Sheena.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I got distracted there. It's excited to see people I know popping on the show. Elected, I think the big thing that I focus the most on is day-to-day issues. Being a police officer, I interact with everybody from all cross segments of people's ethnicity, their creeds, their backgrounds, their beliefs, their ideologies. I engage with everybody. And I think that's one thing that I believe we need more of is statesmanship representation in our elected officials. And that's something that I've campaigned on from the very beginning, is focusing on those issues that impact people's day-to-day lives, such as the traffic congestion in Austin. That impacts everybody, regardless of how you vote, regardless of what you believe in. That impacts everybody. The homeless crisis we're facing with, it impacts the people that are homeless, it impacts the business owners, it impacts our community. Focusing on those matters that truly can provide positive change. And I get to see that. I see the causation of when bad policy is implemented, or when we have knee-jerk reactions to things that then trigger unthought out policies coming in, and the unintended consequences that come from that. I think that's something that I've got a lot of experience in, and I look forward to making sure that we focus on setting our community up for success rather than failure through, poorly thought out plans.
The whole good cop, bad cop routine, everything of things. Is there honestly, Justin, an internal pressure to not be the good cop and initially playing that bad cop routine?
I don't think there's any pressure to be a bad cop. And I think what we need to do is define it. I think when you define good or bad, it's very subjective. That's when you have to look at what is the community standards, what is the community's expectations of our officers. And that's what you see coming with the policy that the chief of police puts into place, or the community standards and expectations of how a police officer is to act and engage with the community. And so we have those standards in place of what defines a good or bad cop. Now, when the subjectiveness of, because of how vague it is, that's where I see kind of the breakdown is what I may deem as a bad cop, or what I may deem as an officer that made a small mistake, you may deem as a bad cop and is always a bad cop, because they may have gotten emotionally involved. The human side of them may have gotten involved, and they may have cussed at someone when they shouldn't have cussed at someone. To what standard is a bad cop? Is it an officer that made a mistake that we can correct and we can get back out there, that for the vast majority of the career has been an outstanding police officer and they just had a human moment and made a bad decision? Or are we looking at police officers that have a systemic record of, engaging in bad policy that are violating the standards of the community's expectations? And for those officers, we have things in place. And for those officers, they do get punished, they do get penalized, and up into including termination. So I think it's very important that as a community, we need to ask ourselves, what do we define as a bad officer? And what other standards are they not already covered under policy? And I think you would find that if you actually looked at APD's policy manual, you will find that many of the standards that we as a community in Austin expect of officers to behave are already in policy. There's already written down in words what are the expectations of us to behave as police officers for the city of Austin. They're already on paper, they're on writing. And when we violate those policies, we are held accountable. Chief Manley definitely holds us accountable. And a lot of times the public doesn't see that. Some of that stuff can be done because, okay, there was a human moment. They made a cuss. They cussed at someone they shouldn't have. Let's work on that. That's one thing I've always been very open to. A lot of people don't realize this. We have a program in place. If you feel as though you've been wronged by a police officer, that you've been disrespected by a police officer, we have a thing that we use to open up for mediation. It's not promoted, and I don't know why. I've been a big advocate for mediation because I believe this. When you are on an emotionally charged scene, when you're affecting arrest, it's chaotic all around you, you are not going to have a productive conversation. A police officer may tell you 3 times to get back, and then they may push you until you get the fuck back. Sorry for my language. Sorry. That was a quote. They may cuss at you while pushing you back. In that moment is when you have the issue. Like, I was assaulted by an officer and I was cussed out by an officer. And then you're asking them, why did you do that to me? Why did you do that? That officer is thinking about the crowd around him, trying to secure the arrest, trying to affect all the different things you're trying to do. So what happens after that moment? Both sides leave. The officer's upset at the citizen for what they did, and they take away a negative mindset towards the citizenry of Austin. And then the citizen takes away a negative experience from the police. They never come back and have a fruitful conversation about that incident, and they never come back and work on how do we improve that interaction. That's why I promote people going to mediation with these officers. And because when you have the mediation, you can actually have these kind of conversations that we're having now, and you allow for that understanding to take place. You may not agree with what took place, but it provides an understanding for the officer to understand the citizen's point of view in a calm, collected, safe space, and it provides the citizen an opportunity to understand where the officer came from. So in the future, when they're with each other, interacting amongst each other again, the officer may be a little more patient or try using a different approach to another citizen, and the citizen may try a different approach in the future when engaging with a police officer on a scene that they may have questions about. Because a lot of times what we'll see is the officers are maybe in a use of force situation to try to get a person under control that's resisting. The community doesn't know the context of what led up to it, or why they're doing it. All they see is an officer wrestling with someone, and they're under the new narrative that that's police brutality. They're jumping in, interjecting themselves in a situation. When this happened here downtown a few years ago, a guy actually had a knife in his waistband and was trying to stab the officers. And what the people didn't realize is by them trying to push the officers off would have allowed the guy to get access to the knife and either hurt the citizen that's trying to help out or the police officer. And so that's something I always tell people. If you have a moment where you feel disrespected by a law enforcement officer, where an incident occurred that didn't go the way you thought it should, please request from our internal affairs or from the Office of Police Oversight or whatever entities out there and request, I want to have a mediation with this officer. I want to understand this better. Because understanding, we were all grew up that knowledge is power. And when we can come back in these moments and actually talk this out with each other, I think that's where you will see the healing take place between the police and the community in understanding to thrive and be more informed police officers and more informed community members.
Where can people go to find the information about getting that mediation set up?
Just contact the Austin Internal Affairs Department.
Okay.
Or request a supervisor to the scene. Say, I want to speak to a supervisor. That's something else I always tell people to do is if you're having an argument with a police officer out there, and it's not, and you realize that maybe the officer's not calming down, or maybe you're not calming down, or it's not having a fruitful conversation, you can always request, I want to speak to a supervisor, and we will immediately call a supervisor over. And sometimes that's the best approach, because when you're having a heated conversation and it gets to an argument, no one's right. No one's ever right. And it breaks down things. And it's important for us as officers to remember when you start noticing that, to break away. I've been in that situation before. I'm open about it. I've been there. That's the human side, where I've gotten into these heated conversations with people when I was in my younger years. And it took these experiences and these complaints to learn how to better engage with the community on these situations, rather than feel like, well, they should be doing this because I'm an officer, this and that. And the community feels like, well, you're an officer, you should be doing this. And it's not effective communication. So request a supervisor to the scene if there's situations. And for the fellow officers, look out for each other. You see when your partner's getting in a heated conversation, pull them aside. I've been pulled aside before. And I've pulled other officers aside before. Say, hey, man, let it go, bro. Because it happens. It happens to all of us. This job is very stressful. And it's important that we look out for each other. And when we see an officer about to make a mistake, pull them off. Say, hey, bro, chill out, man. Let me go talk to him. And it happens all the time. The community doesn't see about it, but it happens all the time.
Say I'm somebody that's getting pulled over and I feel like maybe the situation's not going the best. What's the best way that you think I can start to de-escalate the situation?
That's one of the beauties of living in the United States of America is we have a judicial system. If you're getting a citation for something that you believe you didn't do or that you disagree with, or you disagree with the situation around it, you have a place that takes you away from the emotional part, and it's in the judicial system. It's in the court system. And we also have body cameras now. I personally love having a body camera. I think it's one of the greatest pieces of technology we have because it provides, for the most part, it provides a point of view that captures a lot of the audio that takes place. It doesn't do a good job of capturing what an officer sees because our heads move around, so the video always doesn't capture what we see, which is why context is important. But it captures what's being said, and it captures part of the story. And I think it's important when you go to trial or if you want to speak to a supervisor on scene. It's a great way to de-escalate. And like I said, even at the scene of a traffic stop, you can request a supervisor. Just be patient because it's going to take time for them to get there. But even at the scene of a traffic stop, you can also request a supervisor to come to the scene.
And if for some reason some police officer told you that that they can't bring out a supervisor or something like that, is there something that you should mention to them or anything like that?
I have never heard of a supervisor not being able to get to the scene. They may say, I'm tied up with something else, but I'm on my way. And that's where you just have to be patient. They'll come. So I have never witnessed a supervisor not make it to the scene. It may take some time, but they do come to the scene.
Mm-hmm. TJ? What's a large item that you want to see changed in the APD and Austin as a whole?
Right. Yes. And I did just ask that question. Yes.
Oh, I'll tell you that one of the largest items that I want to see changed in APD is, let's be selfish. We need a better working conditions for the police officers. You know, the toilets at the police headquarters, a lot of them don't work. There's asbestos in the building. It's old. You know, and it makes officers feel as though the place where an officer works at, the staple of their headquarters, is something that is of pride. It's something that the community should be proud of. It's something that the officers should be proud of. And when you provide officers with a very poor quality working environment, they may not have as much pride, which really impacts morale and everything else. So I think I personally would love to see as a large item issue is that a proper police facility be funded, and that we also have the staffing that we need, especially now more than ever. We need every officer we can get. So we need to make sure that our elected officials at city level, you know, provide the facilities and the staffing that is needed to keep our community safe. As far as Austin as a whole, Austin's a great place, man. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, Austin's a great place. It's a great place to be. It's a great place to work. The people here are always very friendly. I've worked on 6th Street for many years of my career. The tourists that come here are always very friendly. There's not really much I really want to too much change about Austin. More so just that our elected officials are a little more supportive of public safety, a little more supportive of the police officers. And I wish they wouldn't stoke so much animosity and division between the police and the community, because you see the consequences of that. When you start having your elected officials try to pit the community and the police against one another, it creates this environment that we're in right now. And I wish they wouldn't do that, but rather be the leaders they were elected to be and actually work on getting people to cross those bridges rather than making barriers on the bridge.
What was your first interaction like with police before you were a police officer?
Oh man, I used to listen to NWA, and you know, I know the lyrics of the song. You know, when I was a high school kid, I was like most kids, and I was like police in a very poor light. But you know, there's a couple of sorry, my dog got all amped up. Sorry about that. Hey, Dixon, stop.
We love animals.
Oh yeah. You know, I was in high school, and we had 2 school resource officers. One was an African American female named Officer Johnson, and the other one was Officer Lukey. And it was because of those 2 people that I decided I wanted to go into law enforcement. You know, my school, we had a lot of career pathways programs, and they taught courts and criminal procedure, police and society. And it was those types of classes that really intrigued me into wanting to go into the law enforcement profession. So I joined the Police Explorer program, started doing competitions, and found out I really enjoyed the policing aspect, that you can actually be a community member that's actually helping your community out and protecting your community. And that was something that really helped me out a lot, and really inspired me, was those 2 police officers. And I owe everything I am today because of their mentorship and just their support behind me when I was 15 years old. So I'm very, very grateful and very happy to have had those kind of mentors in my life. And I think that's something we need to look at the school resource program on. You know, most officers are put there in an enforcement capacity. Mine were put there as teachers. They were certified teachers, and they taught classes. They wore a police uniform, and it really changed my perspective of police officers from being that authoritarian figure to more the human side of it, because I associated them with it like I did with all my other teachers. And it was a great way to have that perception, and it really impacted my life in a very positive way and changed my perception of law enforcement. I gotta give a shout out. We got downtown Steve Brown just reached out, man. How you doing, bud? Good seeing you on here.
I got to give a shout out to Steve too, man. Steve's one of my favorite people on 6th Street, so let's go.
I'm not giving a shout out because I don't know who I'm shouting out to right now.
Trust me, if you knew Steve, you would be shouting him out. Let's just put it that way.
He's great people, man. He's been a good friend of mine for many years. Well, I just want to comment on this.
Go ahead.
If I may. Sure. You know, I want to talk about this protest that have been taking place. We talked a little bit about this off camera, and I just want to put this out publicly right now to everybody. I want everyone to understand that myself and many of the other Austin police officers and DPS troopers and sheriff's deputies and everyone else in law enforcement that's getting pulled into this, I want you to know the vast majority of us, and if not all of us, understand that the vast majority of people at these protests are there to be peaceful protesters. I know this. The people I work around know this. The problem we're having is with these agitators and anarchists that are infiltrated those what's supposed to be a peaceful protest. As much as I don't always see eye to eye with the Austin Justice Coalition on policy issues, I am very. When people do something that's commendable, I'll give them credit for it, and for them to call off their protest yesterday in the name of peace. Not saying that they were there to promote violence, because I do not believe they were, but just so that we can allow time for peace to come into the scene, rather than giving these anarchists a platform to exploit. And so I want you all to know out there in the community, we know this. We do not like seeing what's taking place. We do not like these anarchists coming to our community, destroying our community we love. And we definitely despise these anarchists coming in here and trying to take away from your protest. And you should also be extremely upset that these agitators are coming here, taking away the message that is to seek out justice for Mr. Floyd. And so if you have any of them that try to come in there, that try to provoke anger out of you, to incite and exploit your emotions, and to throwing a bottle, to throwing a rock, to spray painting and graffitiing, to looting a store, hold them accountable too. Keep them in check. Feel free to, point them out to us. Say, hey, listen, that guy over there is trying to get us all to go out here and go burn a car down, or to go take a homeless person's mattress and set it on fire. I'm sorry, that infuriated me last night when I saw that video. Now, if you haven't seen it yet, these anarchists go grab a homeless person's mattress underneath.
I saw that. That was terrible.
I am livid. That took place. I have my views. And I think we really need to work on improving the homelessness situation out here. I think we need to reinstate the camping ban again. I'm very excited about that. But I'm also for being a human being, and to torch a person's mattress that they sleep on is those are not the values of Austin, Texas. I know that for a fact. And it just shows that these anarchists are coming in here not about to help better the African American community, not to help better honor Mr. Floyd's memory, but they are out here to seek chaos, and we cannot stand for that as a community. And I call on everyone, these peaceful protesters, please help keep your protest peaceful by pushing those people out of the crowd. Push those people out, call them out publicly, point at them and yell anarchist or agitator, identify them to law enforcement, so that way we can do our job to remove them, so we can enforce and keep your Second Amendment right, or your First Amendment right protected, and allow you a platform to speak peacefully, to vent your anger and to be heard, so that way our local leadership and law enforcement can hear what you have to say. And let's remove them from the equation and allow your voice to be heard peacefully.
One really cool thing that I recently saw, there was a news story out that you actually saved the life of one of our Austin neighbors. He was attempting suicide off a bridge, and you apparently walked him off the bridge. If you could share those events and how that went down.
I'm trying to keep his identity protected. That was a promise I made to that person, and I'm going to do just that. I'm not going to reveal some of the situations around that. But here's a person that it was really sad to see a human being wanted it in his life. A lot of people don't realize there's a lot of rebar underneath those bridges. We've had a few people impale themselves on the rebar down there. We had one a few weeks ago that they were jumping down there just for fun, and one person didn't come up, and we later recovered his body. He was deceased. So there is a lot of danger underneath those bridges jumping from that height. I know a lot of people are like, I do it for fun on the weekends. Well, some people don't make it back up. And to watch someone, all I could think about was that guy that impaled himself, and just mentally prepare myself to see that imagery take place again. And it's just something that was heartbreaking to see a human being that felt like their life had no value anymore. And it was heartbreaking, but being able to listen to this person and being able to try and remind them that their life had value. And, always try to find the silver lining in things. And during the coronavirus lockdown, there was a building right behind him that said Hope on the side of the building. And it may still be there. You may still see it downtown already. And it was just one of those things that was just really inspirational. It really touched me. And I asked him about it. Is hope something that resonates with you? And we started talking about the changes that this person wanted to make in their life, the things that they regretted, the things that they wanted to improve upon. Once we got to the point to where he no longer wanted to commit suicide, but wanted to better himself, the next challenge we had to face was getting him to trust us. This is a person that hasn't always had the best run-in with law enforcement. It's had other issues. So building trust and emotion in a state like that was a challenge. It made it very hard to get this person to trust us that we were there to help them and not arrest them. Now, I got to give a big shout out to Jeremiah Cooper and everyone over at the Jails to Job program. They're an organization that I fully support. They work on youth recidivism reduction, helping give kids that may have been incarcerated job skills that they need to set themselves up for success as an adult, so they don't become sick with part of the revolving door of the criminal justice system. I'm a big supporter of recidivism reduction programs. And so I called Jeremiah at midnight, and he took my call, put him on speakerphone, and I let those two talk. And I'm glad to say that a few days after that incident, those two got in touch. Jeremiah's picked him up, and they've got him on a progress pathway. They're getting him a job skills program, and really trying to help get him on a pathway. And I'm very proud to report that he's doing well, and he's doing the stuff he needs to do to improve his life and to get to the pathway of just being happy again. And to me, I'm very honored that I was placed in that position to be able to help somebody that's been in a time of need. That's why I got into this job. That's why I became a police officer. That's why I continue to fight to be a police officer, is to help people. And that was the highlight of my career, is being able to really help impact someone's life that way.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you for that. Just staying there, saving an officer. It's
how can law enforcement expect us to support them and not be in fear of them when they are standing on the opposite side of the line from us? And correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't every law enforcement official take an oath to protect and serve the community?
Yes, we do take that oath. It's one that we take very seriously. And this is a matter of perspective, or perception. I firmly believe that perception is reality. What a person perceives, becomes their reality, and it's very hard to change a person's reality. And it hurts it doesn't hurt my. It's hard to hear that you and other community members feel like we're on opposite sides of the line. When I believe the goal is to be on the same side of the line, that's to have a safe community, that's to ensure we don't have criminality running amok in our community, and that we in law enforcement maintain the trust of the community. And the trust is tarnished. The trust is very, very damaged. And how do we restore that? There's only one way to do that, and that's by walking the bridge together with the community and with the police hand in hand. And I don't mean that as it's a one-way conversation, because again, as long as the community doesn't understand the role of law enforcement within society and what the role in law enforcement is within our communities, then we will continue to keep seeing these problems take place. How do we inspire people to have the trust where they don't feel like they have to fight law enforcement when they have an interaction? How do we instill the trust with people that they don't have to run from law enforcement when they've been caught committing a crime? Because that's always the common denominator, or the commonality in these horrific situations, is when someone fights or runs the police. It's a common theme that's there in every critical incident. That's always there. You always hear, well, there was resisting, there was fighting, there was fleeing, every time. And I'm not saying that's grounds to have someone killed at all. If anything, I think it's when two wrongs come together is when you have these horrific outcomes where the loss of life just greatly goes up. So how do we do that? Because that tells me there's a breakdown in trust in the community and law enforcement. And it's also, people don't want to get in trouble. People don't want to be caught stealing. People don't want to be caught robbing. People don't want to be caught dealing narcotics. People don't want to get caught. So there's that fight or flight. Do I run or do I fight? That's where the breakdown in trust comes in our criminal justice systems at. And that's where I think the greatest flaw is. If people didn't feel like they were going to go to prison and come out a hardened criminal, or come out with loss of opportunities, then I think people wouldn't be as likely to fight or run, which is why I focus a lot on recidivism reduction. I think that's where we need to make our changes in the criminal justice system is on restorative justice. So when you get caught and apprehended for committing a crime, you go in there and you learn. You're in a classroom setting where you learn how to become a better person. Like maybe you learn about how your behavior negatively impacted your community, like how stealing from Target is actually causing the prices to go up, which now impact your community that's already having a hard time earning a livable wage. And now you're causing the prices to go up because you're committing theft and everyone else is committing theft, which forces them to learning those kinds of things that a lot of people just don't know about. And not only that, but also giving job skills. If you don't have a job skill, because maybe you've been dealing drugs on the street corner your whole life and you've been incarcerated a few times, and now you're a convicted felon and you don't have access to certain job opportunities, creating a pathway through recidivism reduction that allows you, that empowers you the ability to earn back those privileges and those rights. Could you imagine if we lived right now in a time where if you got arrested for say, a nonviolent, non-sexual offense, and you learned about these things and you got a job skill and you learned a trade like plumbing or being a HVAC installer or an electrician, where those jobs are paying, $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year, and you learn those skills and those certifications while you were incarcerated, and you come out and now you have a skill set that's in high demand, and we get you into gainful employment, and now you're not feeling like you have to go steal, you're not feeling like you have to go build drugs because that's the only trade you know how to do, but we give you another trade opportunity. That's setting our community up for success. And you come out a better person, and not only that, but you go 3 years down the road without another criminal offense, and it goes off your record. You're no longer labeled a convicted felon. You go down 5 years, and you earn back your right to vote. I think that's the conversations we should be having. I truly, fundamentally believe those are the solutions and the pathways that people need and that is being demanded. It's easy to focus on the police because we're the ones you have the most access to. But the root issues and the root causes is what comes post-incarceration. That's why people run. That's why people fight. It's because of the consequences that come. Yes, there should be consequences and accountability to our behavior, but it doesn't mean it should be a detriment to your life afterwards. It should be something to where we can help build you up to be a better person in our community. Now, if you're a sex offender and you're not raping people, if you're a violent offender, I'm sorry, I don't know how to re-offend. I don't know. You're going to prison. You're going to go to prison. I don't know how you rehabilitate that. But for the vast majority, 90% of most offenses are nonviolent, non-sexual offenses. Those vast majority of people, because your violent crimes usually come because there's been underlying nonviolent crimes that have built up to that level. And so we can start working on people when they are first-time nonviolent, non-sexual offenders, get them in these recidivism reduction programs, and start creating that kind of system at TDCJ. I think you'll start seeing a more positive long-term result in the community. But the community needs to understand those efforts take time, and it's not an instant solution. It takes time. There will be people that fall through the cracks. It happens, but let's focus on helping out those people that want the help, that can do the help. Let's give them the stuff they need to succeed and welcome them back like the prodigal son that is spoken about, welcome them back with open arms.
So what are we doing the interim until something like that, the change can occur? Because if, somebody that, has a past history, they might get pulled over and, they look at their record and they see, this person has this and this and this that they got arrested for. And like you said, that's part of the reason they want to run is because they're scared. They don't want to go back to what they just had to deal with, and which is understandable. How do we start to fix that problem?
And that's where I think it's changing. I hate using the word changing the narrative. It's changing our priorities. Knowing what it is that we're demanding of the change we want. Everyone talks in broad strokes. We want systemic changes. What are the changes? What are you proposing? What are reasonable? Because I'm sorry, depolicing is not a reasonable solution to the problem. It doesn't actually solve any problem, and it will probably further problems. We need to understand of looking at changes that are actually going to impact it. So part of this is focusing at the root issues, having honest conversations of what's the common theme behind these issues. Why do people want to run from law enforcement? Why do people want to fight law enforcement? Is it because of the consequences? Yes, it is. Let's relook at that scenario. So let's look at the consequences of it. Is there a failure there? I believe there's a failure there because we're not setting people up for success. Instead, we're setting people up to keep reoffending and keep being re-entered back in. If you're going to be sitting in jail for 2 to 3 years, you should be learning how to be a better person, get into job skills, have something that provides hope of a new pathway, hope of a new life, hope of a new future. That is what needs to be going on in the Department of Corrections. Now, I don't blame the Department of Corrections. They're doing what the legislature tells them to do, and that's where we need to hold our elected officials accountable. You've noticed they're all very silent right now. They are very silent with what's going on. Instead, they're not providing solutions to these root issues. Now, some of them may not just know. They may not just know. Or some of these certain leadership groups that have gotten in these positions of power, they're demanding a certain solution. And you know what? That's not always the best solution. And they're not going to change from their platform. It's getting into the actual community and listening to the actual community is where we can affect the most change. And that's one thing that I hear back time and time again. Most people I've talked to are very open for a recidivism reduction style program to where if they do get caught, they do get held accountable, they know they're not doomed for the rest of their life. But instead, they may actually come out better and do better things.
If someone, like we've seen some of the videos online of people asking the officers to walk with them in the protest. If someone were to ask you to walk within the protest, like what would your answer be to them?
My answer to them is I'd rather just talk to them right there and shake their hand. The reason why I don't think it's safe to go out and walk with some of them, because again, it's the antagonists and the anarchists that are in that crowd chanting "kill cops." I think it's foolish to go walk into a crowd of people that are chanting that they want to kill you. I think that's a foolish thing to do. Now, some communities have not had that, and we've seen some communities where people have been able to go out there and walk. I've got one of my good friends. He was messaging me the other day, trying to encourage me to do just that and get other officers to do just that. I think the problem lies is when these agitators are out there invoking the crowd to violence, to throwing things. I think it's unwise to do that. And that's why we need to calm down the rhetoric so we can provide avenues to walk and talk together. Because if we can do that, we're making progress. But right now, as it stands, the rocks being thrown, paint was thrown all over a bunch of officers, things are getting destroyed. There's messages tagged all over the police headquarters that says "kill cops." That's not an environment that I think is very smart or safe to just go blindly walking into. I think that's actually very reckless to do that, because you get those antagonizers that do end up killing a police officer. It's going to set everything back, and it's going to be more harmful than productive. So until we can calm down the violence, we can calm down the anger, and get to a place where we can actually have a sincere conversation like this we're having right now, until we can get to that place, I don't think it's smart. And hopefully we can get to that place soon. That creates an avenue and a pathway where we can walk together side by side and listen to each other and have these kinds of conversations.
If someone was trying to, I guess, in turn, reach out to you and have a discussion with you, like what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way, Twitter. As you guys know, I respond to Twitter. I'm very involved on social media. You can email me at my campaign email address. It is justin@berryfortexas.com. That's JUSTIN @BERYFORTEXAS.com.
Yeah, I just want to wrap it up with something like that, just to kind of say that, we asked some questions that were important to us and that we discussed with other people, but I wanted to make sure that everybody felt like they had an opportunity to reach out through, either trying to reach out to you or, like they said, like you said earlier, reaching out to the internal affairs if you've had an incident with an officer that you're unhappy with, So I appreciate you having this conversation with us.
Yeah, no, and thank y'all for this opportunity, and thank y'all for being leaders in the community that are calling for calm and peace right now. We need to preserve our Austin culture out here, and that is one of peace, one of understanding, one of patience, and we cannot allow these agitators and anarchists to come into our community and wreak havoc. I think that's not in the best interest for any of us, especially the African American community right now that's grieving, and rightfully so, and that needs to be heard. And to those agitators and anarchists, you're doing more harm, but you know that. That's why you're doing it, to that community. And I really hope we can all stand up for that community right now, give them the space they need to express their concerns to law enforcement in a place that is not being filled with rocks and bottles and other nonsense being thrown. So if you see anyone doing that, just know they're taking away from that community and from that community's ability to have a meaningful conversation right now. So hold those people accountable, allow that community to be able to speak to us in a way that we keep it peaceful so we can start engaging in these kinds of conversations and start working on realistic solutions that can help them out.
Thank you so much for saying all that, and I'm really glad that we had an opportunity to talk about this. And just to give everybody a perspective, like this all occurred over the past couple of days that we were able to communicate with Justin and get him on. So I'm very thankful to you to have this discussion with us. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you all very much. I got to start getting ready. About to head out again. They called in again. So, but you guys, please just be safe, be careful, look out for one another. I'm going to do the same amongst my peers as well. And again, the sooner we calm things down, the sooner we get to work to making things better.
Yes, sir. Be safe out there.
You too, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.